Well, a South Jersey elementary school teacher accused of having a child with a student faced a judge today. 34-year-old Laura Karen of Cape May Courthouse.
It started with a smile. A trusted teacher in a small New Jersey school became a second mother to her students. But behind the doors of her home, trust turned into betrayal, and innocence was stolen in ways that would shock an entire community. A fifth-grade teacher, a 13-year-old father, and a baby whose existence uncovered it all. This is the story of how Laura Karen, a 34-year-old teacher, became a foster parent to her student, only to betray that role in unimaginable ways. Over 4 years, a dark secret grew, and in 2019, she gave birth to a child. But the truth stayed hidden until a Facebook post in December 2024 blew the case wide open. This isn't just about one person's crime. It's a story about trust, power, and the systems meant to keep children safe. Stay glued as I unravel every detail of this twisted case, from the trust that was betrayed to the investigation that uncovered the truth, to the fight for justice that's just beginning. And if you love uncovering shocking criminal cases like this, subscribe to Criminal Echoes now. Together, we'll shine a light on the darkest corners of society, one case at a time. The small New Jersey town of Middle Township had always been quiet, a community where neighbors exchanged smiles and children played freely in tree-lined streets. At the heart of this tranquility stood Laura Karen, a beloved fifth-grade teacher. To the outside world, Laura was a role model, dedicated, kind, and nurturing. Parents trusted her completely, even inviting her into their lives beyond the classroom. For many, she was more than a teacher, she was a second mother. But behind the smiles and warm exterior lay something far more sinister. It began innocently enough. Laura befriended a local family whose children, 2 boys and a girl, were her students. Over time, she became a fixture in their lives. She attended family barbecues, offered to help with schoolwork, and eventually suggested that the children stay over at her home to ease their parents' workload. It was a gesture of generosity, or so it seemed. At first, the sleepovers were rare, just a night or 2 each month. But gradually, Laura convinced the family to let the children live with her permanently, citing her role as a resource family parent, a foster caregiver approved by the state. The parents, overwhelmed by life's demands, agreed. After all, Laura was a trusted authority figure, someone they believed would care for their kids like her own. But cracks in this picture-perfect relationship soon began to show. The youngest boy, just 11 years old at the time, was placed under Laura's wing. She made him her focus, buying him gifts, praising him constantly, and isolating him from his siblings. The dynamic shifted in unsettling ways that the boy's older brother and sister would later recall with growing unease. They noticed how Laura's attention went beyond what felt appropriate. And then, there were the nights. While the siblings slept upstairs, Laura began inviting the youngest boy to her bed. At first, it was explained away as comforting him after bad dreams. But one morning, his sister awoke early and walked downstairs. What she saw froze her in place. Her brother, asleep in Laura's bed. Her heart raced as she quietly crept back upstairs, too afraid to confront what she'd just witnessed. Still, the family remained blind to what was happening behind closed doors. Laura was a master manipulator, weaving a web of trust so strong that no one could suspect the horrors brewing in her home. Parents praised her for taking in their children. The school commended her for her dedication. No one saw the shadow lurking beneath the surface. But shadows can't stay hidden forever. Unbeknownst to anyone, Laura was carefully grooming her young victim, blurring the lines of authority, exploiting his innocence, and pulling him deeper into her control. What had started as trust had now become something far darker, far more dangerous. And so, the stage was set. The betrayal had begun. But no one, not the children, not their parents, not the town, could have imagined the storm that would one day shatter this facade. The Karen family home sat in an unassuming New Jersey neighborhood, a place where trust was as natural as the quiet hum of suburban life. Laura Karen, the friendly fifth-grade teacher with a warm smile, had quickly become more than just an educator to her students. She was a friend, a confidant, a trusted figure in the lives of families who saw her as a safe haven for their children. For the victim's family, this trust came easily. Laura didn't just teach their children, she invited them into her life. First, as a kind babysitter who always made them feel welcome. It started innocently enough: weekend sleepovers, movie nights, and a few hours of extra care. But slowly, the boundaries began to blur. What started as a one-night favor soon became a permanent arrangement. The victim and his siblings were now living under Laura's roof. At first, the arrangement seemed ideal. Laura appeared to be the perfect guardian, stepping in when life became too chaotic for their parents. But beneath this veneer of generosity, an unsettling pattern began to emerge. Late one night, the victim's sister woke up in the dark, her eyes adjusting to the faint glow spilling in from the hallway. She noticed something strange. Her brother was no longer in the shared bedroom. He was in Laura's bed. The next morning, the tension was palpable, but no one dared speak of it. Days turned into weeks, and the sister's unease grew. The bathroom became another ominous space. The victim would enter for a shower, only for Laura to follow, locking the door behind her. Whispers and fleeting glances became their only defense as the siblings tried to make sense of what was happening, trapped in a home that should have been a sanctuary. The victim's brother later recounted a chilling moment to authorities. A night when he pretended to be asleep but watched Laura's shadow move across the room. His young heart raced as he realized what he was witnessing. His brother was being abused. But fear kept him silent. What could a child do against an adult whose trust seemed unshakable to everyone around her? For years, these moments piled up like bricks in an invisible wall of silence. Laura's influence over the children tightened. She became more than just their foster parent. She was a gatekeeper, controlling not just their home life, but their secrets too. No one outside the house suspected a thing. To the world, Laura was still the caring teacher who gave so much to her students. But the cracks in this facade had begun to show, and those cracks would eventually split wide open, exposing a darkness that no one could have imagined. The question loomed: how long could Laura maintain her grip before the truth forced its way into the light? Suspicion hung heavy, like a storm cloud waiting to break, and soon it would. The truth unraveled in the most unexpected way: a seemingly innocent Facebook post. It was December 2024, and a father casually scrolling through his timeline stopped, staring at a photo of Laura Karen's 5-year-old child. The child's resemblance to his son wasn't just striking, it was uncanny. His heart raced. Could it be? He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard before typing the post that would set off a chain reaction. Does anyone else see what I'm seeing? This child looks a little too familiar. The post didn't go unnoticed. Friends commented, some with shock, others with quiet agreement. Whispers turned into phone calls, and eventually, those whispers reached the school superintendent. That was when the alarm bells began ringing. A trusted educator, a woman who had been part of the community for years, was now at the center of a chilling suspicion. Law enforcement was quick to act. Detectives arrived at the father's home, armed with questions he didn't want to answer but had to. He told them about Laura Karen, her years of closeness to his family, and how his sons had spent countless nights at her house. But the Facebook post was just the beginning. The detectives dug deeper, interviewing the victim and his siblings. What they uncovered was beyond disturbing. The victim's sister revealed waking up to find her brother in Karen's bed. Her voice trembled as she described seeing the teacher lock the bathroom door while her brother showered. Then came the revelation from the victim himself. She said if anyone found out, she'd go to jail, and it would all be my fault. But the final blow came when DNA tests confirmed the father's worst fear. The child was his grandson, the product of an abusive relationship. The breaking point wasn't just a single event, it was a cascading wave of truths, each more horrifying than the last. The investigation was no longer about speculation, it was a hunt for justice. On a quiet Wednesday morning, they knocked on Laura Karen's door. She answered calmly, but as the handcuffs clicked, her face drained of color. Behind bars, Karen maintained her silence, but the investigation was far from over. Detectives dug into her past, uncovering how she had groomed the victim's family, gained their trust, and positioned herself as their resource parent. The betrayal ran deep. As news of her arrest spread, the community erupted with shock and outrage. How could such a trusted figure have hidden such darkness for so long? Little did they know, this was only the beginning of the fallout. The air in Middle Township Elementary School felt heavy, almost suffocating, as the news spread like wildfire. Laura Karen, a respected teacher, foster parent, and trusted figure in the community, was now the focus of an unthinkable scandal. For years, parents had entrusted their children to her care, never imagining the dark secrets that would eventually unravel. When the Facebook post emerged in December 2024, suspicion turned into shock. The post, written by the victim's father, wasn't just an accusation. It was a haunting realization that a predator had been hiding in plain sight. The resemblance between the teacher's child and his own son was undeniable. And as whispers of this revelation spread, the community descended into outrage. Parents were paralyzed by fear. They questioned how someone who seemed so devoted to their children could exploit that trust so completely. Some demanded answers from the school district. How could this happen under their watch? Were there warning signs that had been ignored? Laura Karen was placed on paid administrative leave, but the damage was already done. Students were confused, teachers were stunned, and the school scrambled to offer counseling services to those affected. But could therapy undo years of abuse and shattered trust? For the victim and his siblings, the fallout was far more personal. The boy, now an adult, wrestled with guilt and confusion, conflicting emotions born from years of grooming. His siblings, once witnesses to the abuse, struggled to comprehend their own roles in the nightmare. Their childhood home had turned into a crime scene, their lives forever scarred. As the story reached the media, the courtroom became a stage for outrage and sorrow. Spectators gasped at every new revelation: the secret text messages, the locked bathroom doors, the tragic irony of a baby born as both evidence and heartbreak. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered with signs demanding justice for the young boy and his family. The town, once quiet and unsuspecting, became a national headline. Middle Township Elementary's name was etched into history, not for its achievements, but for its failure to protect the innocent. The question on everyone's mind wasn't just how could this happen, it was how do we make sure it never happens again. Amid the fallout, one thing became painfully clear. Trust, once shattered, is nearly impossible to repair. The courtroom was silent, save for the occasional shuffle of papers and hushed murmurs. Laura Karen sat at the defense table, her once authoritative demeanor reduced to a tense stillness. The room held its breath, awaiting the judge's words. Outside, a crowd gathered, their voices an indiscernible hum of anger, curiosity, and disbelief. The community's outrage was palpable. How had a trusted teacher, a foster parent no less, fallen so far? Prosecutors meticulously unraveled Karen's years-long betrayal. They painted a picture of manipulation. A young boy, barely into adolescence, groomed under the guise of care and protection. The timeline of abuse was damning. Eyewitness testimony from the victim's siblings, the DNA test confirming paternity, and the Facebook post that exposed the secret. Every piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of Karen's defense. The victim's testimony, though brief, was harrowing. Now an adult, he described the weight of secrecy he carried for years, his voice trembling but resolute. "I trusted her. She said she was protecting us," he admitted, his words cutting through the courtroom like a blade. The baby, now 5 years old, became a haunting symbol of the crime, both evidence and a reminder of a stolen childhood. Karen's defense attempted to cast doubt on the timeline and the siblings' accounts, but it was a fragile strategy, crumbling under the weight of forensic proof and emotional testimony. The judge's tone was firm as she recounted the aggravating factors: the victim's age, the duration of the abuse, and the ultimate betrayal of a position of trust. The sentence was severe but fitting: 20 years in prison without the possibility of parole. As the gavel fell, the room exhaled. For the victim, his siblings, and a community shaken to its core, justice had finally been served. But questions lingered. How had this gone unnoticed for so long? Could the school or child welfare services have intervened sooner? As Karen was escorted out of the courtroom, her expression unreadable. One thing was clear. Accountability wasn't just about one person. It was about a system that had failed to protect the most vulnerable. The courtroom was silent, save for the faint creak of a wooden bench as someone shifted uneasily. The gavel's echo had long since faded, but its significance lingered like a storm cloud. Laura Karen's face was emotionless, a stark contrast to the chaos she had left in her wake. But this wasn't just about her. It was about the cracks in a system that was supposed to protect the most vulnerable, and how trust, once broken, left scars that extended far beyond one family. For years, Laura Karen had been more than just a teacher. She had been a pillar of the community. A woman entrusted to shape young minds had used that trust as a weapon, grooming not only her victim, but an entire network of people around her. The parents who trusted her, the school that employed her, the system that allowed her to become a resource family parent. Each thread was part of a tapestry that unraveled with devastating consequences. The question burned. How did no one see it? The victim's father had unknowingly passed his son into the hands of a predator, convinced that she was a safe haven. The school had conducted routine evaluations, yet no red flags were raised. Even the legal and child welfare systems failed to notice a predator hiding in plain sight. What happened in that quiet New Jersey town wasn't unique. It was part of a larger, darker pattern. Across the country, similar cases of abuse have been revealed, almost always involving someone who had infiltrated a position of trust: coaches, pastors, teachers. These roles, revered and unquestioned, often provide predators with the perfect camouflage. And then there was the victim, a boy now grown but haunted by a childhood stolen. He was thrust into the public eye, his name whispered in hushed tones as a victim, a father, and a survivor. His story echoed in the hearts of many, those who were abused but never spoke up, those who were betrayed by the very people who should have protected them. But this story also raised uncomfortable questions for society at large. How often do we place blind faith in authority figures, assuming their titles ensure their integrity? How often do we overlook warning signs because they don't fit our preconceived notions of danger? The truth was harsh. Danger often came with a familiar face. The community began to grapple with these truths, calling for reforms in schools, more rigorous background checks, and accountability at every level. Parents whispered in carpool lines, wondering who they could truly trust. Teachers looked over their shoulders, aware that one of their own had shattered the image of safety their profession was built on. Laura Karen's actions had ignited a firestorm of scrutiny, one that extended far beyond her trial. It was no longer about just one woman's crimes. It was about dismantling the systems that had allowed her to thrive undetected for so long. And as the case continued, it became clear. The fight for justice wasn't over. It was only beginning. The silence that followed the verdict was heavier than any gavel strike, a haunting reminder of what had been lost and a challenge to those left behind. Would they rise to the occasion, or would history repeat itself in another unsuspecting town? The answer lay not in the courtroom, but in the choices society made moving forward. The courtroom was silent, each second stretching into eternity as the judge's voice cut through the tension. The jury's unanimous verdict was delivered: guilty. Laura Karen, once a beloved fifth-grade teacher whose smile had masked a web of deceit, now stood as a convicted predator. Gasps rippled across the gallery, a collective release of breath held for too long. Outside the courthouse, the air was thick with unease as reporters scrambled to relay the story to a nation already gripped by its dark twists. This case wasn't merely about a teacher gone astray. It was a chilling revelation of how trust, a cornerstone of every community, can be twisted into a weapon. Parents had entrusted Karen not just with their children's education, but their safety, their innocence, and she had betrayed them all. But beneath her individual guilt lay a larger question. How had the very systems designed to protect these children crumbled so disastrously? In a shadowed corner of the courtroom, the victim sat, now a young man, his once vibrant demeanor replaced by quiet resilience. His gaze remained fixed on the floor, his expression stoic, but his clenched fists betrayed a battle within. Rage mingled with a cautious relief. This was justice, yes, but no verdict could rewind the clock or erase the scars. He was no longer the wide-eyed boy who had trusted his teacher implicitly. That innocence had been stolen, piece by piece, over years of manipulation and abuse. As the verdict spread through news outlets and social media, shockwaves reached beyond the courthouse walls. Parents across the nation sat at their kitchen tables, staring at their children's faces and wondering, Could this happen in my community, in my child's school? The betrayal felt personal, a stark reminder that predators often lurk in plain sight, disguised as trusted figures. But the outrage wasn't confined to Laura Karen. It turned toward the institutions that allowed her abuse to persist. How could a teacher, a foster parent no less, have raised red flags, hosting children in her home, cultivating questionable relationships, without intervention? How had whispers of concern been ignored? In this tale of exploitation, silence had been her most powerful ally. And yet, even in the depths of despair, there was light. A child born from this tragedy represented both a haunting legacy and a fragile hope. Removed from Karen's shadow, the child was placed with family, surrounded by love and shielded from the weight of their origins. They were a testament to resilience, a symbol that even from the darkest chapters, life could endure and grow. The community, too, began its path to healing. Schools overhauled their safeguarding policies. Parents became more vigilant, more demanding of transparency from those entrusted with their children's welfare. Conversations once whispered in uneasy tones became loud, urgent, and unapologetic. Justice had been served, but it left behind echoes that demanded action. The story of Laura Karen became a rallying cry, a somber reminder that trust must be scrutinized and earned, never blindly given. As the courtroom emptied and the town returned to its uneasy normalcy, one undeniable truth lingered. While wounds may heal, the lessons of this tragedy must never fade. Because stories like this one are more than just headlines. They are warnings. Warnings that vigilance is the price we pay to protect the vulnerable.